What's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with the final episode of the Realignment Dynasty here on NCAA 14. And of course, we gotta do this NCAA series with the college football revamp, of course. That really did breathe life into this game. But we are coming off of a truly incredible season. We finished 16-0. That ends up being our final record. Undefeated. We make it through the college football playoff, win that as well, beating TCU in the process. And it was truly a fun game. I really enjoyed every aspect of this football game. It was a close game. But now we're going to go ahead, what happens to our program after that? You see the thumbnail. Can we handle the dominance that we've built here in Michigan State? We've been able to, at least at this point, put together 2 consecutive 10-win seasons. We are now talking about a program that's glitched, but they were, that's 16-0. We went 11-3 the year before that, and then 9-4 there as well. So it was a really great season. It was a really magical season by all means, and I'm really thankful for that. But what we're going to do in this episode, we're going to do a 5-year sim. We're going to see, what happens to, our program, but also what happens to your guys' custom players. Do we see some of them make it to the NFL? Do we see them make an impact in conference and national championships around the country? We're going to have to wait and see. So I hope you guys are ready for this episode, man. Should be a nice one, a nice way to kind of put a cap on this series, man. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're excited about the future of this channel, because trust me, guys, I do have a couple of things in the work. Hit that subscribe button as well. And we're going to jump right in. I wanted to go ahead, check out the season stats. And we've actually did really well in terms of our stats. Really historic season for us. For starters, Billy Hammond, he actually does end up winning the Heisman Trophy. And that was something that I completely glossed over in the past, but he was actually a Heisman Trophy winner, man. He had a great season for us. He ends up with 4,400 yards passing, 40 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, which does sound bad, but we did play in 16 games. So in that concept, not as terrible. Really looks good. I'm really curious to see if he ends up going to the NFL or not. He also ends up winning the Maxwell, Walter Camp Award, and the O'Brien. So he really brought a bunch of trophies home to our program. And he was also able to fend off more talented players on paper. Anthony Stephens was in second. Justin Singleton, who actually sets the career rushing yard record. He ends up rushing for over 5,500 yards. And he ends up breaking that record that Danian Tomlinson actually held at TCU. So congratulations to Singleton. Phil Osborne's up here as well. Vince Jones on top of it. This was a good Heisman list. And Billy Hammond, most surprising, first year as a starter too, he really took off and he really elevated our program. And not only was he capable of elevating our program, he was also able to lead the nation in passing yards. He ends up with 4,400 yards on this season, and that was roughly 700 yards more than the second place person, which was a quarterback that we faced in that national championship game. He ends up with 3,700 yards on the year. Also played in 16 games, I do believe, so he played in just as many games, but we just really showed the great work that Billy Hammond put in over the course of the season. It was a special one. Now, as for rushing yards, Bobby Russ, man, he was certainly cooking throughout the year as well. He ends up finishing in 3rd place in the NCAA in rushing yards over the course of a season. He was actually just 40 yards shy of 2,000 yards, which is an incredible accomplishment of himself. And he was just a freshman. He was just a freshman on the field, so we will get him back next year for sure, which I'm really excited about. He was also really good. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about was our defense. The defense was great in this little recap. Top 5 in solo tackles. It's all Michigan State guys. Kev Wood, he led the way. He had almost 110 solo tackles, as that should be good enough to make it to the NFL. We'll have to wait and see there. Patrick Goshwin was right behind him. He had 88. Early Austin was in third, and then a couple of other corners as well. Ryan Herring from that DB group, he was in 4th place in the country, with Akeem Williams as 5th. But you could also take this with a grain of salt as well, since it seems like in those user games, solo tackles, it's easier for us to get them than if this entire season was simulated. As for sack leader those, we had a pair of guys that both had double-digit sacks throughout the season. Daryl Hicks, the sophomore, ends up leading the nation in sacks. He ends up with 13 sacks. But there was another person on our team that had double-digit sacks. Brandon Lyles, he ends up with 10 sacks, number 2 in the NCAA. And those were both our starting defensive linemen, absolutely harassing opposing backfields. As for interceptions, Greg Harvey finds himself on this list as well. He was tied for first place for most interceptions in a season. He ends up with 6 interceptions. He was also a really good ball hawk. Now, one more thing that I forgot to mention was that Nathan Games, one of your guys' custom players, was also on this list as well. He ends up with 3,300 yards passing on this season, which was good for 4th place in the NCAA. But first, let's take a little dive into our first season prior to starting this 5-year sim. Jack Gunner was a defensive coordinator that we went up against in the national championship game, and he was one of you guys' custom coaches, and he was originally the coach of Arkansas State when we first started this series, got fired, landed on his feet here at TCU, and now is going to be the head coach of the Iowa State football team, man. I am excited about the Cyclones. They're going to get a great coach, man. He's got A- prestige as well. So I really like this second chance that he's going to get as a head coach. But we will go ahead and also see some of your guys' custom players graduate or move on to the NFL level. For starters, we have Andrew Gervey, the 6, who spent 4 years at Houston, played all 4 years, and amassed 2,000 yards of offense with 11 total touchdowns. Not a big touchdown heavy guy. Houston, not that great of a program, but he is projected to go into the 4th round. That being said, though, we will see one of your guys also going into the transfer portal. He was redshirted his freshman year, but it looks like he wants to take his talent somewhere else. He is actually going to go to Texas A&M. Moving on to the University of Michigan, and we have a couple more of your custom guys going off to the NFL. LaVon James, who kind of had a step back year. He, ran for 1,200 yards his junior year, only ran for 850 in his senior campaign, but that is still good enough for the senior from St. Louis to get a first-round draft grade into the upcoming NFL draft. But another thing that I found surprising, though, was St. Breezes, a junior redshirt. He will actually declare a year early, forgo that senior eligibility, and he has a 4th-round NFL grade. Another custom player that will be graduating is Isaiah Crocker, the quarterback for North Texas. While he does not have NFL aspirations, he did put together a solid NFL career. He ends up with 51 passing touchdowns, as well as 16 touchdowns on the ground, being given the opportunity to play all 4 years. Also going on to the NFL is a guy you guys saw quite a bit in this series, Nathan Gaines, the senior redshirted quarterback. He is going to go on to the NFL draft and has himself a 2nd-round grade. As for Deuce Brown, he did contribute for the Southern Miss football team for all 4 years that he was on campus, but that will also not be enough to make those NFL dreams come true. A solid player, 85 overall by his senior year, but just didn't put up enough on the field or has high enough athletic traits to get that NFL call. Now, one thing about Texas A&M not making it to the college football playoff, look at all of this talent that they had put together. There is a ton of NFL draft picks on this screen for the Aggies, and yet they barely finished in the top 25, so it has to come down to that coaching. But Seth Randolph, he is going to be a 1st-round draft pick as he was a senior redshirt, And then a guy that didn't really start until his senior year, Zeke Lightning, he is going to end up being a second-round projected pick to move on to the NFL. So two corners here for Texas A&M that do make it to the NFL. You love to see it. And the last custom prospect departing out of this season that we're doing right now is Caleb Heck. He is going to end up being a third-round draft pick, hailing from Virginia Tech. He really exploded in his senior year, 1,200 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns as well. Really good out of the backfield, incredible athleticism as well, that I'm certainly am going to think that NFL teams will definitely fall in love with. But there were a few of your guys' custom players that did end up signing on the dotted line and might be able to get a chance to check in on them as their college career progresses through this 5-year sim. We'll start out west and then progress out east. We got Brandon Robinson, the 3-star from Las Vegas. He's going to go across the country and sign with the Indiana Hoosiers. So that's a good pickup for a well-known basketball school. Speaking of teams with a little bit of basketball history, Saquon Olander, the number 16 corner in the country, he will also travel from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, and they will play for the Cal Bears. A 3-star signing, a high-end 3-star signing. Also signing his letter of intent to play college football is Jackson DeVille. He's the number 2 quarterback in the state of Florida and is leaving that same state in order to go one state north to play for the Georgia Southern Eagles, which, if you guys remember, actually did make the college football playoff all the way back in year number 1 of this series. Speaking of Georgia, though, we do have an out-of-state signing. We got Sean Gold, a 3-star that we actually did try to go for a little bit using that low-lock cheese, but the Texas Longhorns did swoop in and take him right from under our nose. So Sean Gold, who is the number 42 running back in this recruiting class, he's going to go play for Texas and try to go with those hook'em horns. And the last custom player that we are going to follow through this 5-year sim sporadically is Rilo Young. He was a 97th ranked defensive end in this recruiting class. Hailing from Prattville, Alabama, he will also be going out of state and playing for the Commodores of Vanderbilt, a very academically prestigious school. So we get to the end of the regular season, and we got a key matchup that we'll see in the Deep South Conference. We got Florida State taking on Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech, they got, as you guys know, a really solid wide receiver in Dash Randolph. And his Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, they are ranked number 15 in the country going into this conference championship game. So they certainly do have or at least they did have an outside shot of making it to the college football playoffs, but it doesn't look like that they might be able to pull it off here. Down by a couple of touchdowns here in the 4th quarter, and Dash, he was able to make a few plays in this football game, but it ends up not nearly being enough, though, to get the job done. So we do end up seeing Florida State be that spoiler ultimately. They end up beating Georgia Tech in their own stadium. That was the thing. Georgia Tech got the host, and they still lost. And Dash Randolph with a very pedestrian game that we did end up seeing. He only ends up mustering 48 yards receiving. But that does eventually take us to the national championship game right here. Your Michigan State Spartans, we actually do make it not only to the playoffs, but we do make it to this national championship game as well. We will take on the Alabama Crimson Tide, who did make it all the way to the national championship game as a number 7 seed. So they had to pull quite a few upsets, as did Michigan State. We had to pull an upset as well in order for us to go to this national championship opportunity. And early on, we kind of struggle out the gates as Billy Hammond, kind of going even with Alabama early. This was a college football playoff matchup that did happen. I believe it was back in the mid-2010s when Michigan State made their only college football playoff appearance, and Alabama was able to absolutely dominate them. But things are a little bit different here in the video game world. We actually will go ahead and take a 28-17 lead into the second half. Alabama trying to keep up, and they will have a chance to tie this football game up, but you're not going to be able to get anything going on their next couple of possessions. And then Billy Hammond, he is really going to start taking over. We really begin to see ourselves pull away in that fourth quarter. And listen, it was certainly a hard-fought game that we did end up seeing in this one, but even though they're going to end up seeing a garbage time touchdown towards the end, we are going to end up winning by 20 here in this national championship game. A nice 48-28 victory, and we ended up with almost 500 yards passing. That is the crazy part. Billy Hammond, our Heisman Trophy quarterback, he does end up being named Offensive Player of the Game, with Early Austin getting 11 tackles and an interception. But this is how the bracket ended up turning out. We started out beating Oklahoma State by 18. Then we beat Auburn by 20. And then we did the same thing to another Alabama team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. We won by 20. Whereas Alabama had a defensive matchup against LSU. Barely beat USC, who has been really good in this series. So they will end up finishing as a national runner-up. Now, in this season, we actually do get a chance to see one of your custom guys be named as All-American. That is Nelson Crocker. He's going to be named second-team All-American. A great season for Nelson Crocker. Ends up with 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns to go with it. He really breaks out after really barely being used as a starting caliber tailback first 3 years for the New Mexico Lobos. But he finally gets his chance to start, and he makes the most of the opportunity, man. Great player. Could have been in the high 90s if he was actually redshirted. But it is what it is, and he showed what he could do. And we'll see if he makes it to the NFL or not. That we will have to wait and see. As for general stat leaders, Billy Hammond once again was in near the top of the NCAA. Billy Hammond ends up finishing in second place this season. He ends up with almost 4,000 yards passing once again. He's really been tearing things up in the NCAA the past couple of seasons. So it's been really fun to watch him grow and develop. Really cut down the interceptions as well. I really love to see that. For running backs, though, Nelson Crocker was in that top 5. He did finish 5th with 1,600 yards. Russ, our sophomore tailback at this point, he did regress a little bit. He only ended up with 1,300 yards rushing, but that was good for top 25 in the NCAA. Receivers, Leslie Johnson led us. He was in 6th place with 1,150 yards in the entire country. I believe he is a senior to this point, so that's really coming out on top. Tackling, we don't have anyone in the the top 5 in customs or Michigan State guys. King was the closest with 43 solos. He was 19th. For sacks, we had one guy in the double digits, and that was Cutler with 13. He had about 3.5 more sacks than anybody else in the entire country. And then for interceptions, Lane of Memphis actually led the nation. He had 7 interceptions on the year. Dude was an absolute ball hawk. That will not be denied from him. That being said, we will see some movement with your custom coaches, as Coach Jones, who is a huge UCF alumni, he's actually going to get the job offer of a lifetime. He is actually going to be offered the head coaching position for the University of Central Florida, and they've been a consistently good program in this universe, constantly winning 10 games. They have fallen off a cliff a little bit, 7-7 and 4-8 in their last couple of years, but we'll see if Justin Jones can go ahead and turn it around. Certainly a lot of talent on this roster, which does now mean that his Mississippi State job is now open. Now, Coach Gentry, who was still coaching at Mid-Tennessee State at this point, he did also get a not a scholarship offer, but they did receive an offer to coach at Marshall, and Marshall's a decent squad, 3-star school at this point, but they went 3-9, compared to Mid-Tennessee State, who, went 8-6. They just won a bowl game as well. And Coach Gentry just doesn't feel that this is the right opportunity. Plus, that 7-year extension definitely provides some nice job security as well. So he will actually remain at Mid-Tennessee State as of right now. But we do say goodbye to some more of your customs as we go through the first year, or at least wrapping up the first year of the sim. We do see AJ Mullis graduate from Duke, and he was definitely not good enough to be an NFL player, but he was a solid starter for the Duke Blue Devils for 3 years. Ends up topping nearly 1,000 yards in 2 of his 4 seasons. He ended up with 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns on the ground, and also chipped in with 6 touchdowns in the receiving game as well. So a good career for AJ Mullis, but that will not be enough to see him graduate. Also graduating, but surprisingly not going to the NFL, is Richie Spurlock, a true senior from Hoover, Alabama. He was a guy that had a solid season, 40 tackles, 4.5 sacks, couple of forced fumbles too. I thought he had the what it takes to make it to the NFL, but the game disagrees, and that's something that I do want to see for EA College Football. I want to see some more logic in terms of who's a part of these NFL draft classes and who does not end up in said NFL draft classes. But good college career though from Richie Spurlock. One custom that will be going to the NFL though is Dash Randolph, the 4-year player from Georgia Tech. He ends up as a 91 overall, and he ends up being projected as a 3rd round pick. Got on the field of the last 3 years, spent his freshman year on special teams, and when he was a starter, he did pretty well. Averaged, at least 7 touchdowns over the last 3 years. He knows how to find the end zone, and that's why he is going to be seen as an NFL prospect. And of course, we can't go through saying goodbye to some custom guys without talking a little bit more about Nelson Crocker. We saw him as a 2nd-team All-American, and he does get enough attention to be seen as a legitimate NFL prospect. He now boosts his stock all the way to a projected 4th round pick. Also making their way to the NFL is Nas Evans. And Nas Evans, he looks like a big-time prospect. Being able to see the field all 4 years, he's a national champion as well back in season number 5, and he is going to be seen as a 1st round pick. We'll see if he's a mid, early, or late 1st rounder, but a great accomplishment for Nas Evans no matter where he ends up going. Meanwhile, at Tennessee, we will see a couple of your custom guys leave. Chase Gentry is going to go on to the NFL. He was projected to be a 6th round pick. Ends up with about 2,600 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Really cut down on the turnovers in his senior season, but he is more of a running quarterback. Definitely will need some development, but should find himself in the NFL, especially with that good size. However, the same could not be said for Hollywood Jackson as a 6'6" target. He is not going on to the NFL. Just does not really have much production. He was really an afterthought in this Tennessee offense, and that really shows in his production, which is unfortunately not going to be good enough to at least be drafted into the NFL. And last but not least, we go ahead and see what's happening with Jaden Battle. He will also graduate. Does end up as a solid overall, but did not see the field much until his senior year, where he put up 25 tackles, 3.5 sacks. Also has a few pass deflection as well, which is surprising for a defensive lineman. Unfortunately, his production will not be enough, and Coach Jones will have to bring UCF back to glory without his services as he goes on to life without football. So we start year 2 of this rebuild with some pretty strong expectations, but while we are expected to go back to the college football playoff, at the same time, they're kind of sleeping on our program a little bit. They went ahead, they have gone about putting us only at number 8 in the country, even though we are the 2-time defending champs at this point. But, number 8, that is a pretty strong spot to be in overall. I'm really not going to complain all that much, as this is what the rest of the top 25 is going to be looking like. Definitely some parity. There's hardly any dominant teams in the NCAA at this point in this series, so yeah, all that being said, we'll go to the end of the regular season. We'll see if there's any notable conference championship games. And of course, we'll see who ends up going to the national championship when it's all said and done. So what does happen to Mississippi State once Coach Jones did end up leaving for the UCF job? Well, J.J. McFly, the quarterback for Mississippi State, one of your guys' customs that, a little bit under the radar, he ends up giving his guys an opportunity to maybe go to the college football playoff. Depends on what they do here in the Egg Bowl against Ole Miss. This is a conference championship opportunity as McFly, he's going to get out into the pocket. He's going to get a nice slide down as well. That almost picks up the first down under his own merit. As McFly will also throw to the right-hand side. We'll watch Harrington do get some work in. Ronald Harrington's going to get a nice 23-yard reception as McFly looking to lead his troops downfield, looking to make sure that his team at least gets it into a one-possession game before we do end up going into the halftime locker room. As now, McFly, he's going to look for the end zone, and he is looking fly for a white guy as J.J. McFly finds the end zone. Touchdown, Mississippi State. And the Bulldogs are down by just 5 points here in their conference championship. That could decide a college football playoff spot, as that is a nice throw there as well by McFly that will end up cutting this game down to just 5 points. That's been McFly's best game. He did throw an interception in this ball game, but we do end up seeing McFly come through when it matters the most. Down by 5, his team gets the football back. He's looking, gonna throw it over the right hand side, throws a dot over the middle to Egwin Lynch. That's gonna be a 22-yard reception. And to take the lead in the Egg Bowl, that could decide a conference championship, maybe even a playoff spot as well. These guys are going to take the lead, and Mississippi State's going to hang on. They're going to win this football game here, and this is off of Coach Jones's guys for the most part. They go on and win the new look Sunbelt Conference Championship, and McFly looks solid in this one. 19 for 31. 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception to go with that, and a solid completion percentage. He completed 61% of his passes throughout the game, but also got a touchdown on the ground as well. He ended up with 7 carries and 24 yards with that rushing touchdown as well. But we also got our Michigan State Spartans looking for that opportunity to maybe not necessarily go to the college football playoff once again. Our ranking is currently, well, actually no, we're ranked number 3, so we actually could be okay as long as we win this game, right? That's really the only thing that matters. We'll see what Dane Adams can do as he starts to get more playing time in this world after we get into this 5-year sim, as we continue to go to Dane Adams a little bit early in this football game. Not getting the big plays downfield, but is at least keeping us on schedule as we'll eventually go for it here. 4th and 2. We could not pick up the first down initially, but on the 4th down conversion, Dane Adams, he does help a brother out a little bit. We do pick up the first down there. But then those big plays really start to open up for us. We see Dane Adams with that 20-yard reception. That's going to get us close to midfield. And then right-hand side, Dane Adams was actually initially all by himself. If it was a little bit more to the outside, we could have, lobbed it up and get more yards there. But, we'll definitely take the yards where we can get them. And going into this 4th quarter, we looked really good in this game. And Michigan State, man, under Coach Royal, once again gets another conference championship. In the Great Mid-Eastern Conference, we beat Ohio by a few touchdowns. So that should punch our ticket in to the college football playoff, as Dane Adams does finish this game with 8 catches and 74 yards. And the true sophomore also gets a carry in this game. He does get 1 rush for 4 yards in the ball game. But potentially a game with the most implications prior to the college football playoff bracket being released. We got Virginia taking on Clemson here in the Carolinas Conference. So it's going to be a little bit of battle between Casey Carmichael, quarterback for Clemson, and then Dakotas Everett of Virginia. he is also playing in this game as well. Definitely could solidify a college football playoff spot in this conference championship game as well. Lots of really good games involving your custom guys, man. That is what you really love to see. You know, these custom guys making a difference as starters within college football. But we're going to see Casey Carmichael really start to take over this game before the end of the first half as he throws one out to Nelson into the end zone. Touchdown, Clemson. And Casey Carmichael gets that big score that he was looking for all the time in the world. And the Virginia defense just doesn't have the horses. It could be a long day for this Virginia defense. Dakota's Everett, he's going to really have to bring it if he want to see his guys with a legitimate shot to win this conference championship game. On the road, by the way, since Clemson is, of course, hosting here today. As Casey Carmichael is going to take it to the outside. He's going to run it out onto the perimeter. Actually gets a pretty solid run there, even though Virginia did ended up having solid contain. And then we'll eventually see Casey Carmichael find the end zone. Do have a little bit of a score bug, but we will see Carmichael running into the end zone all by himself. As now we got back to Carmichael late in the third quarter, all day to throw this football, and just throws one on a rope. You love to see those kinds of throws. And Carmichael now just having his way. Another touchdown for Clemson here, as the Clemson Tigers are just running away with it here. That is Matt Wright, that is able to make the catch over the middle. Nobody goes with him. I don't know how you could allow somebody, really any receiver, to be that butt naked open. So now 3rd and 10, but it's not all bad though. Dakota's Everett, he's going to get a couple of highlights in here as well. He's going to get a big time throw down the field. And then Everett's going to end up finishing this drive eventually. Gets it out to his stud receiver in the back of the end zone. So we will see a touchdown for the Virginia Cavaliers here. As we will see Casey Carmichael with the football once again, throwing it to the right-hand side. And just a good play action. He's doing a great job executing off of the play actions. The kind of stuff that you love to see as a NFL scout. But Clemson does end up winning this football game. They are going to be champions of the Carolinas Conference. And we see this player of the game here, of course, going to Casey Carmichael in that bomb that he had towards the end of the first half. I mean, back then it was only a 10-7 game. It really could have gone either way. But really, after that specific play happened, we did end up seeing Casey Carmichael and the Clemson offense take over in the second half. And you can see those stats on screen. He does end up getting the player of the game, and we will be seeing them in the college football playoff. It's just going to be a matter of where they end up being seated as we check out the stats for both customs that participated here today. Casey Carmichael, 285 yards, 2 touchdowns, did throw a couple of interceptions, so he was far from perfect, but he did make the big plays when it mattered. He did also chip in a touchdown on the ground as well. Meanwhile, we check out Dakota's Everett stats, and it just wasn't the same kind of effort today. 196, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He did also end up getting sacked 5 times in this game, and in his final, one of his final collegiate career games, 5 carries for negative 38 yards. But with all of that, we still have more custom players here leading up to the Year 2 college football playoff. We got Georgia State going on the road to take on Florida Atlantic in the Deep South Conference Championship. And their defense going to be led by this stud muffin right here, Asante Randolph Jr. And did not get a lot of highlights for this guy. He did only have a couple of tackles in this game, but he is a force to be reckoned with for sure. And finally, before we go ahead and check out the college football playoff bracket, we got Notre Dame taking on Tennessee here in a key conference matchup. Tennessee not ranked in the top 25, and Notre Dame an absolute long shot to make it to the college football playoff. But, winning conference championship, definitely important. We'll see if Rod Robertson can lead the way as the left-handed quarterback does get off to a decent little start. Gets it out to Michael Stanford. who's able to thread the needle, and Rod Robertson, like I said, off to a great start so far, 6 for 8, and he's got that touchdown that does knot things up with Notre Dame. As even though Tennessee is hosting here today, Tennessee not as highly ranked, so they're coming in as underdogs for sure. We'll see if Neyland Stadium in the snow can help out whatsoever, as Robertson's going to look towards the back of the end zone, and it's going to be caught off the deflection by Marcus Murray. Now, how about them apples getting all that going? Not a good decision whatsoever, but like I said, sometimes better be lucky than it is to be good. And it does keep Tennessee in this game a little bit as we jump into the second half now. Robinson's actually going to take off and run with this football and does manage to go ahead and pick up a first down on the ground. He is known for that mobility, and we're going to see that mobility come through a little bit here. Sliding down real quick, but it's going to be too little too late, though, as Notre Dame, they will be able to overcome the stadium atmosphere that is set here at Neyland Stadium, and they're going to win this football game. Notre Dame, they do win by a final score of 31-21. Now, this is all about highlights. I'm not going to show those lowlights, and there was plenty of lowlights, unfortunately, for Rob Robertson. 2 touchdowns, but he threw 5 interceptions in this game, and they still found a way to only lose by 10. Certainly felt like this was a lost opportunity here for Tennessee Volunteers. But it looks like our football program that we built will still remain strong in the second year of the sim, as we do make the playoffs once again. We do make it as a number 3 seed, and we will take on USC in the first round. So that being said, we'll see if we can make yet another run to get a 3rd consecutive national championship. But our Michigan State Spartans will actually not find their way to the national championship game this time around, as we're going to see 2 new teams in with an opportunity to win it. We'll see USC, who has been pretty good in this dynasty, have not won any national championships though, but have been a very consistent playoff contender, take on TCU, and the TCU Horned Frogs. They used to have Coach Gunner on that defensive staff, and while he is getting ready to move on to new opportunities, if he hasn't done so already, this has been a pretty good game, and TCU, they are going to go ahead. They might end up messing around and winning this game, except USC trying to make it a game here towards the end, but TCU, they do find that one last gear in this ball game, and TCU is actually going to be your national champion in spite of allowing over 500 yards of total offense. The Horned Frogs are going to be your national champions, winning pretty convincingly as well. So with USC being in a national championship, that does mean we ended up losing in the quarterfinals this year, so we don't get that repeat that we are looking for. But to make us feel any better, we did go up against a team that did go to the national championship and almost won the entire thing. As for how these season stats shook out here in the second year of the sim, we do see multiple guys leading the NCAA, or at least close to it. For example, just at the quarterback position alone, 3 top 5 guys. We got Carmichael of Clemson, who finishes in 2nd place. Also tied for 2nd, though, is Dakotas Everett of Virginia. He also ends up with the exact same number of total passing yards, in spite of slightly less games played, someone to think about. And then JJ McFly was in the top 5 as well. He finished 5th in the NCAA with 3,500 yards passing. As for the running game, we saw Brad Thomas top the NCAA, able to run for 2,000 yards, so congratulations to him. Receiving wise, we saw Williams of TCU lead the way. He ends up with almost 1,400 receiving yards. It helps having a quarterback that did also lead the NCAA in passing yards. As for tackles, Hudson of Notre Dame led the way with 52. But tying with him, though, was Clark of West Virginia. He also had 52 solo tackles. As for sacks, we had 2 guys with double-digit sacks this year. Harrell of Colorado State led the NCAA with 13.5 sacks. But Cummings also ends up with double-digit sacks representing for the Army Academy. And finally, rounding out the NCAA leaders, we have the interceptions leader from Tulsa. Parks ends up with double-digit interceptions. He has 10 of them on the season. As for All-Americans, Dakotas Everett in his senior year does end up with first-team All-American honors, and it is well-deserved. He ends up with 45 touchdowns versus just 6 interceptions. If he doesn't make it to the NFL somehow, we definitely will need to riot because he has elite accuracy, and it was well warranted. He definitely deserved that honor. But for the return men, though, we see Saquon Olander, a true sophomore custom from Cal. He gets first team honors as well as a return man. Defensively, does not put up a ton of stats, but he does also win the Jet Award, which does go to the best return person in the country. He didn't have any kick return touchdowns or punt returns, so I am kind of surprised that they gave this award to him, to be honest. But as we get through the rest of this sim, we say goodbye to more of your custom guys, one of which is Walter Dornez, 4-year player at Army. He put some good production up over the years, almost 3,000 receiving yards, 23 touchdowns. Is good enough to go to the NFL, but like I said, when he first signed, he came with a higher purpose. He wanted to serve his country, and that's exactly what it's going to do. He's going to become an officer in the U.S. Army. Draft, it's Casey Carmichael. He is going to forgo his senior year, and he's projected to go as a 4th-round pick. I'm not surprised by this at all. Threw for 40 touchdowns, 3,800 passing yards. Also chipped in 4 touchdowns on the ground as well. He's a really complete guy. Not much that he can gain from his senior year, to be honest with you. So, Casey Carmichael, he's going to the NFL. Speaking of guys that are leaving for the NFL early, Dexter Sanders is another one. Being at Georgia for just 3 years, he was a really electric player to watch over his collegiate career. He had over 1,000 yards rushing in each of his 3 years on the field. He started as a true freshman as well. Doing that at Georgia, that's a pretty big deal. So no surprise he's leaving after 3 years, chasing that NFL dream as well. One person that I am really surprised about not going to the NFL, though, was Gilbert Cooper. He was an LSU transfer. He came to Louisville, and his first couple of years at Louisville, he did really good work. You know, over 1,000 yards rushing, looked shoo-in as an NFL prospect, but stayed for his senior year and had a massive dip his senior year, and that might have cost him a lot of money. We'll see if he does make it as an undrafted free agent or something like that, but it doesn't look as good as it did just last season for Gilbert Cooper. But we do also have some surprises here in terms of guys leaving early. Now, we know Ian Gain, he was the starting quarterback for the Michigan Wolverines, but that being said, his backup also declares for the NFL draft a year early. Colby Hennington, we barely seen him play. He honestly wasn't that good, but relying off his measurables, he does have insane measurables, 6'6", 229 pounds, but is a statue though. He is projected to go in the 7th round. One person that I'm not surprised about going to the NFL though is JJ McFly. He was in the top 5 in terms of passing yards over his collegiate career. He only did start 1 year though, so that was why he did end up being a late round selection, but being selected in the 6th round, he definitely has a lot of upside as he did lead Mississippi State to a conference championship. However, one quarterback will not be going on to the NFL though. It's Cash Randolph, who did spend his time playing at North Carolina. He was someone that was extremely accurate as a passer, but that never translated. He only had 2 seasons where his completion percentage was above 50%. He did start his senior year, but only 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. It's not going to cut it. But he won't be the only quarterback to not go to the NFL, though. Flash Williams was actually benched during his senior year, and it's easy to see why. 14 for 33, 143 yards, and 3 interceptions in his senior campaign. He never had a completion percentage over 50% at any point, which is really surprising because he has 99 throw accuracy. Like, I don't know how you pull that off, but, you know, maybe he just doesn't have the mental fortitude to be an NFL quarterback, and that's okay. One player, though, that does have what it takes to make it to the NFL level is Joshua Carmichael, a true senior from Griffin, Georgia. he came to Oregon and put up some solid stats. Nothing too eye-popping, but does have good size for a linebacker. 6'3", 227 pounds. He does have some pretty solid traits, but at only 87 overall, I am surprised that he is going to get an NFL opportunity. Also saying goodbye to college football is Caleb Thaddeus Jr., who has spent 5 years with the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes from the Village, Oklahoma. Was a solid player his senior year, but was one of those players that good enough to start in college football, not good enough for an NFL roster. He only amasses 2 career sacks during his entire college career. And the last player that I wanted to talk about before jumping into year number 3 is Dakotas Everett, and this is a massive surprise. You want to talk about a quarterback that had 45 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and is not going to the NFL? That's it, boys. We need to write it down in the comment section. Hopefully, and I know I mentioned this multiple times at least to this point already, but I would like to see some better watching in terms of who actually goes to the NFL and who does not get that opportunity or is like an undrafted free agent, so definitely unfortunate for Dakotas Everett. But as we move into year number 3, we are certainly treated as a team that consistently makes it to the college football playoff. We are now number 8 in the preseason poll, but we definitely could compete with any of these teams, man. I'm looking at like the rest of the teams around the country, and I'm not seeing a team out there that, could, if I'm looking like, we probably will end up losing that game. We could play with almost all of these teams, if not all of them in the country, and it's gonna be really fun to see how this year 3 of the sim ends up turning out. We'll see if Michigan State can make it back to the college football playoff once again, and with that, I'm gonna see you guys at the end of this regular season. We'll see how things shake out. So as we do go ahead and wrap up the regular season action in year 3 of this sim, we do end up seeing a few of your custom guys once again in conference championship action. We start out with the Utah Utes here. They do have Jeff Jefferson III, who not only is one of your customs specifically, we also will witness him with really the shattering of a school record. That is now his 99th catch of the season for him. One more catch will put him at 100, and that will of course do that for him. So 100 catches for Jeff Jefferson, as the Utah Utes got a lot to play for, man. They really have a golden opportunity. If they can win this game, if they can beat Colorado, then they will be going to the college football playoff. If not, they're going to have to wait and see what happens, as Jeff Jefferson does end up making yet another catch here in traffic, as now we'll see Jefferson, some reason, being left by himself. This is the most dynamic weapon that Utah has, so I don't know what they're planning over here, but it is what it is. And Jefferson, he's going to make the most of those opportunities. But in spite of all of that, though, Utah actually is going to lose this game. They lose to Colorado, so we'll see what happens to Utah. We'll see if they have what it takes to still make it into the college football playoff. They do have a little bit of wiggle room, but this certainly will not help their causes whatsoever, as Jeff Jefferson did end up with 69 yards receiving this game off of 7 catches. However, he did fail to find the end zone. So another conference championship game to look after, though, is the California Bears. They are going to play host to the Nevada Wolfpack out here, as we're going to take a look at Saquon Olander. He is no longer a just plain old return specialist. He is now actually starting for this Cal defense, and a similar situation for them. I mean, we saw Utah lose in their conference championship, so that could very well open up a spot for one of these teams on the outside looking in. And Cal is certainly in there as well, as Saquon Olander. One thing that he is really good at, he is just very talented in terms of making tackles in the open field. Still needs to work on his coverage skills at least just a tad bit, but making these one-on-one tackles, that is really valuable to have, and especially in a game where Cal's offense they do have a rougher time getting going here, but eventually Nevada will get the big play downfield, And even on a lower light, look at the effort by Olander, able to make the touchdown saving tackle. Now, Nevada will still score here eventually, but all that being said, Cal's going to hang on. They will win this game 24-17, so not an A+ game from their offense by any means, but Olander was great in this one. The true junior ends up with 8 tackles, 7 which were solo. He also was able to get that tackle behind the line of scrimmage. And finally, we will see if Rod Robertson can go ahead and see about going to redeem himself after that horrific conference championship performance that he had last year against Notre Dame. We'll start with really a throw that requires a lot of confidence to make. Chris Curtis had a 25-yard reception right there. That is not an easy play to make, and he's going to even drop this one up in the bucket as well. That's Brian Jackson. Not an easy throw to make whatsoever. I mean, this had to be precise if you're going to lob it up like that, and just works to perfection. So Tennessee are going to tie this game against Northwestern, but then it really starts turning into that Rod Robertson show. I mean, we get a second passing touchdown here, 10 for 14 on the day. Certainly a better start overall than what we saw against Notre Dame last season. And speaking of good starts, how about Franklin getting behind the defense? And that is going to be touchdown number 3 for Rod Robertson, dropping it right in the bucket. This is a big time throw that we are going to witness right here. You absolutely love to see it. As now, 1st and 10, Robertson going to drop back. He's going to look over the left-hand side, gets it out to Franklin, and Matt Franklin will go ahead and pick up a gain of 33. So that will lead to, another scoring opportunity for the Volunteers, which they are going to, of course, partake in, and that now makes it touchdown number 4 for Rod Robertson. Much better than what we have seen from him in the past, and this is even with college football playoff implications on the table as well. They do come in ranked number 8 in the country, and Robertson realizing that they are certainly right on the bubble as of right now, leaving no doubt on the field. They do end up redeeming themselves from last year's heartbreaking loss at the conference championship. They make it back. They get to host conference once again as a football program. And this time they got Northwestern, and Northwestern, they really did not have a hope or prayer in this football game. As Tennessee, they are going to end up winning this game probably by, I want to imagine, at least by a couple of touchdowns. Robertson, we'll see if he ends up being named the player of the game, and he actually does here. And just a brilliant performance. The senior redshirt, 400 yards passing, 4 touchdowns through the air to go with all of that as well. And then on the ground, also doing some things as well. Not relying on those legs as much. He only had 6 carries in the game that went for 19 yards in the ball game. So with that, Michigan State, we actually do not make the college football playoff this time, but we do see a couple of your customs getting involved. UCF, led by Coach Jones, gets the number 1 seed. Tennessee gets the number 7 seed, led by Rod Robertson. Texas A&M and Clemson also have a few custom guys. They will actually meet in the quarterfinals. And then rounding out this tournament is Alabama and Oklahoma. So all that being considered, we'll see who ends up making it to the national championship with this bracket, and check out some of those highlights from said national championship game. But that does take us to the national championship game. We're going to see if TJ Warzone can take his guys. The former Raging Cajun transfer, can he lead them to the national championship against Alabama and gets off to a nice start as well? To get this game underway, Kobe Duke's going to get the reception. Nice little 20-yard catch as TJ Warzone does lead a pretty solid drive, but does not lead to any points. But the beautiful thing about TJ Warzone, though, TJ Warzone is a dual threat quarterback. He can't just hurt you in the air or just hurt you with his legs. He can do both. He can do whatever you can ask him to do, and it's looking pretty good for Texas A&M right now as we're getting into the second half. We're starting to see those Aggies begin to pull away, and you can really see the confidence get bolstered from TJ Warzone as this game goes on, delivering dot after dot after dot. This is simply not the same Alabama team that we have seen in the past. This could be a 17-point lead as Warzone makes a cut to the inside and finds the end zone. Touchdown, Texas A&M. How about TJ Warzone putting that safety on skates? He hit him with the and he's going to be gone like a girl in a country song, baby. You absolutely love to see it. So, still 10-point lead here going into the final quarter of action. We'll see if Warzone can go ahead and wrap some things up here real quick as we see yet another carry for TJ, as this will start to force Alabama to use their timeouts. And just like that, TJ Warzone, he's going to be a national champion here in this 5-year sim, man. He looked great in this one. He's going to even be named the player, or he's at least got the play of the game. We'll have to go ahead and see if he also gets that player of the game as well. You absolutely love to see it though. Texas A&M, they look great in their performance against Alabama, and it looks like they will not give him the player of the game, but all things considered, he had a pretty solid performance. Did throw an interception, but other than that, he did have a pretty efficient day. 250 yards off of 20 for 29 passing, and then of course he had that rushing touchdown on the ground where he was also able to amass 30 rushing yards on the day. So it was a banner year for Texas A&M as they will end up not only finishing the season 13-2, but your national champions here in year number 3. We came in with one undefeated team, and that was UCF, but they lost in the semifinals to Alabama, while our custom guys out in the East, Tennessee and Clemson, they both also failed to make it to the semifinals as well. So we get to the end of season 3 here, and we still see some of your custom guys dominating the college football ranks. For example, TJ Warzone, a junior redshirt by the way, leads the NCAA with 4,300 passing yards, and of course has that national championship. We'll see if he does end up going ahead and go into the NFL. I mean, he is a junior. He's a 95 overall. I wouldn't be shocked if he declared. As for rushing, Pearson of Alabama, who also played in that national championship game, he did end up leading the NCAA by a pretty wide margin. He ends up with 2,100 yards of total rushing on the season. Receiving wise, Jeff Jefferson III, one of your guys' customs as well, finishes second in the NCAA with 1,450 receiving yards, a very good receiving threat out west. Another custom guy led our Michigan State Spartans here in this sim. We end up with 1,281 yards. As for tackling, Lewis of Colorado led the NCAA with 56 solo tackles. For sacks, we have Hurd of Virginia. Actually got a two-way tie between Hurd and McGill. Both had 12.5 sacks, while Wade had 11 on the year. And then for interceptions, Hearn of SMU, who did get to go to the college football playoff, he had 7 interceptions, which led the NCAA. But then in terms of how we did as a team, we of course did not make it to the college football playoff. We took a few key losses. We lost by 4 points to Virginia, who did almost make it in themselves if it wasn't for that upset against Colorado in the conference championship weekend. We do end up wielding out 6 straight wins, most of which happening in conference play. But then towards the end of the season, we kind of hit some bumpy spots. We lost 2 of our last 3 games. We lost to Michigan by 3 touchdowns in a rivalry game. In the other rivalry game, we lost by 1 singular point, and that was because Indiana, they got a game-winning touchdown with 29 seconds left. So you hate to see it. We do beat Rice to end the regular season. We do win 52-10 there, and we do at least win our bowl game. We did end up winning the New Mexico Bowl, which we ended up winning by a pretty solid margin. Alright boys, so we go to the players leaving stage, and we actually have a couple of your guys that are trying to go to the NFL, one of which was Dane Adams, but he's only projected as a 4th round pick, even though he is declaring a year early. So what I am going to do, since he's going to project to be a day 3 pick, we're going to try to see if we can get him to stay, and he does. We get him to stay for his senior year. You absolutely love to see it. I am going to let Brian Lewis go. He's a 1st round pick. I'm not going to stop him from chasing that NFL opportunity, but for these other guys that are, fringe NFL prospects, we're going to get them to come back so that we can try to boost their draft stock. But like I said, we will have some of your custom guys going to the NFL level. Vernon Knight is one of them from the Akron Zips. He put up a pretty decent college career, was a 2-year starter, and with his 91 overall of his and looking like a pure pocket passer, he is going to be projected to be a 7th round pick. Also going to the NFL, but declaring a year early, we got John Stamos Jr., the junior redshirt from Stanford, California. He is projected to go in the 5th round, and so he's got a very nice overall. He put up decent numbers, ends up with 18 touchdowns and 7 interceptions last season. He also had a 52-29 ratio throughout his college career. They do like his traits in terms of his arm strength, but he does need to get better at his decision making. One quarterback that will not be going to the NFL level is Malcolm Jones of Coastal Carolina. The senior redshirt from Palm Bay, Florida. He had some solid skills, but just is not that fast. And also on top of it, he didn't put together great stats in his career. Only 56 touchdowns first, 26 interceptions, and also a completion percentage sitting at just barely over 50% over his time in college. Also saying deuces to the game of football, we got Ron Black, a true senior from Gardner, North Carolina. He ends up putting together a half-decent career. He started his last couple of seasons, put together 5.5 sacks in each of those two years. So, a decent college player, but not a great college player by any means. And then Samuel Matthews, who we saw in a recruiting special in his true freshman year, but after his freshman year, he kind of fell off. He never had the same production as he did his freshman year. So it just seems like he was a guy that, did not fully live up to the potential that he had when he first got on campus. University of Georgia, however, will have a couple of guys projected to go in the 1st round. Tejuan Porter is one of them, 99 overall. He was finally able to put it together his senior year, nearly 1,000 yards receiving, plus 8 touchdowns. Plus, he has all of those physical traits that you want in a wide receiver. I mean, look at the stats that he has. It's absolutely ridiculous, to be honest with you guys. But that being said, he is a projected 1st round pick. And then KJ Jackson, who is a redshirt from Tucker, Georgia, even though he did get injured and did not put up the same stats that he did in his first couple of years as a starter, he will also be projected to go into the 1st round. Keeping up with the NFL guys, Dakota Jackson is another one of them, a true senior that is projected to go in the 1st round of the NFL draft as well. Dude ends up with, not great production. He's someone that did see the field right away, was a solid contributor, but, those measurables that he has 99 catching. He does not drop anything, or at least he shouldn't have any drops, couple of drop passes here or there, but Dakota Jackson should be a great NFL prospect and had a very good career as well. Although I can't say the same for all of your custom guys though, because Class Landolf does graduate. He's a senior redshirt from Huntsville, Texas, and unfortunately for him, he was a guy that he never saw the field. He never saw the field. He's a good player, but just, he was always buried on the depth chart, and I was really surprised that he was someone that, never looked into the transfer portal. Also not being looked at as an NFL prospect, we got Omencius Dawson from North Carolina. Now, he was a guy that put together a pretty good stat line his senior year, almost 50 assisted tackles, 3.5 sacks. He also had 6 pass deflections, of forced fumble, and a couple of fumble recoveries as well. So this is someone that had a very good senior year. Unfortunately, that will not be enough to get the attention of NFL scouts. One player that will get the attention of NFL scouts, though, is Jackson Darden, a senior from IMG Academy. He ends up with a phenomenal senior year. He had 1,300 yards rushing, 18 touchdowns as well. And I'm guessing the only reason he was not considered a first-round selection was because he is, of course, a running back. And, running backs are not valued the same way as they were, 5, even 10 years ago, right? So he's going to be projected as a second-round pick, but he's going to be a very good NFL player. Jacob Klein, however, of Purdue will not be seen as an NFL caliber player. He did put together a pretty good senior year, 700 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns too, but just doesn't love, the NFL just does not love his size, and the fact that he's only an 85 speed guy, in spite of him being 5'10", that's probably why he's going to be held back in terms of being seen as a legitimate NFL prospect. But Bishop Thaddeus will be seen as an NFL prospect, however, as a senior redshirt all the way from River Rouge, Michigan. We let him get away from the scratch of our fingers while in this series. This was not a good football team. Rice only managed to win a few games. Michigan State did blow him out, but he's someone that is very good in terms of his pass blocking techniques. His senior year, he only allowed 5 sacks versus 26 pancakes, so he is a very strong offensive line, and because of his offensive line abilities, he's going to be seen as a 5th-round pick. At least that's what his projection says. Also projected to go on to the NFL is Ron Robertson. Ron Robertson from Nashville, Tennessee, basically a hometown kid. He ends up going to the NFL in spite of suffering injury in the college football playoff. He had a very good senior year as well, 30 touchdowns through the air, and then another 4 on the ground as well. Did lead the Tennessee Volunteers into the college football playoff, but could not reach that national championship game. Now, someone that I was very surprised about in terms of seeing go on to the NFL is Caden Doman. He's a junior redshirt from San Antonio, Texas. He was the backup tailback for the national champions here in year number 3. But his stats didn't really pop out. 91 carries, 568 yards. So, I mean, he got 6 yards a carry, but wasn't even a starter. I guess he wants to go take his chances in the NFL because he feels like there's not really much else he can accomplish at the collegiate level. And the last player that I wanted to talk about before going into season number 4 is E.J. Patterson. E.J. Patterson was a 4-year starter at the University of Southern Florida and put up solid numbers his entire time he was there. Well, he never had that full 1,000-yard season. He was someone that was able to get consistent production, at least 800 yards receiving, all 4 years. Basically, his freshman year, he had 800 yards. I mean, you can holler at me in the comment section if you really have a problem with that, but he's a very good football player, and his production matched what he's able to show in terms of his potential. He's currently projected to go in the 3rd round. So before we do some more simming, we do have a preview as we get into the 4th year of this 5-year sim. And Texas A&M, I'm going to be honest with you guys, they might be the team to beat. Texas A&M, they are A-pluses across the board. They're a 99 overall squad. They also have TJ Warzone, who did come back for his senior year, even though he did win a national championship. But a couple more interesting things in here as well. Coach Credible is leading the UCF Knights. He's got them to preseason number 2. They got a really good football team as well. Definitely some good balance here in the NCAA. A lot of B+, A- teams towards the top. A lot of parity for sure. But I think we got a really good football team ourselves. At this point, we do have the number 8 squad in the preseason poll. So we are projected to go back to the college football playoff. Some other teams to look at, Penn State and Clemson. They also got really good football teams. Auburn's got a solid squad. They made the college football playoffs a couple of times as well. USC is down there. You can never sleep on USC. They're preseason number 18 in the country as we round out this top 25 that you can see. We'll see how the sim goes, and we'll see if our Michigan State Spartans, if we can get back to the college football playoff. Took that step backwards last year. Let's see if we can go back forward. We are officially here in year number 4 of the sim, or at least towards the end of year number 4, and we do make it back to the conference championship once again. This time we will be taking on Ohio State. If we can find a way to win this game, we'll be back in that college football playoff for for the last 4 years. It's been a really impressive stretch by the Spartan squad, as we're going to check in on Dane Adams, who we did convince to stay for his senior year so that, we can try to see if we can make another push towards that national championship. But right now, it's not looking too good. Down 21-0, and Dane Adams is putting together a somewhat solid performance. Going to get a nice little 8-yard catch there in the middle of the field, but it can't just be Dane Adams. The rest of this offense absolutely has to step up right now. Like, Chad Dahl is going to put this one right on the money. That's going to go for a gain of 16. And that will make it 1st and 10, as his Michigan State guys down by 38 in this one. Ohio State has absolutely been dominant so far, as they are trying to make their way to the college football playoff as well. They should be able to get in with a win, but we will go ahead and see if we can make some kind of late comeback. Down by 30 plus, so it's not looking that great, but Dane Adams is still continuing to make plays as he's trying to get himself to that 100-yard threshold. We'll see if he can get there, as we get a nice throw out to Dane Adams down the sideline and gets it down inside the 5-yard line. We will see him finish that drive off, and then he will be able to also find the end zone. And it was just a rough day. You saw him down below. Chad Dahl, he ends up throwing 4 interceptions in this game. It ends up being costly, especially when the defense just could not stop Ohio State. So should be seeing the Buckeyes in the college football playoff. But Dane Adams, great performance, 146 yards and a touchdown. So we'll also check back in on the defending national champions, TJ Warzone. Now, Texas A&M did win the national championship last year, but they were not included in the conference championship last year. That does change this year. Texas A&M coming in ranked number 3 in the country, and we'll see what Texas A&M can do with the opportunity that's bestowed upon them. A win here will get them back to the college football playoff and give them a chance to compete for that title, and that's another big time throw for TJ Warzone. The Louisiana Lafayette transfer throws it over the middle to the tight end, sells the play action so beautifully. I mean, look at this. Nobody around him, and that's simply going to be barbecue chicken. Ain't no way, doubt about it. And Texas A&M is going to have a nice little lead here early on, but Ryan is tight end here as well. William Dennis, he's going to make that catch for 21 yards down the field. That's going to go for a 1st down. We'll also go ahead and see a nice quick throw to the left-hand side, as Levi Daniel was able to win off his route with relative ease. So that will be the 2nd passing touchdown for Warzone in this one. As they extend their lead out, they still hold on to that 2-possession lead, as we'll get one more big-time throw over to Levi Daniel, as that does solidify Texas A&M in the college football playoff. They will get a chance here to go compete for that national championship game. And again, we will see TJ Warzone with that play of the game as well. That throw that we saw initially, able to suck that entire defense in, suck them in there, and really took advantage of the over-aggressiveness of TCU, which, TCU not too far removed from a national championship appearance themselves. We saw them in the year 1, at least not even before of his year 5 sim for Michigan State's first national championship since the 1960s. Much better performance for Warzone, no. 267 yards through the air and then 20 yards on the ground, plus a couple of touchdowns to his name. That doesn't get him player of the game, but is extremely helpful to see. Alright boys, so we definitely fumbled the bag in terms of missing out on a playoff opportunity, but definitely a lot to look over though. Multiple undefeated teams this time, with USC and LSU going undefeated. Texas A&M, the defending national champions, they're that 3 seed, so they're hanging in there. And then a couple of surprises as well. Army makes it into the playoff. Ohio State, who did beat us in our conference championship, they get up in there as well. And then UCF, who finishes 9-3, so they did not even get themselves a double-digit win season. They get that 8th seed, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little simulating in the background. We'll see who ends up making it to the national championship this time around here in year 4 of the sim. But it does seem like we are going to see a new national champion, so Texas A&M is not going to do the repeat. We'll see who ends up winning that national championship, though. UCF, they got a nice linebacker in Paul Peters, who does start for the University of Central Florida, taking on these LSU Tigers, as LSU is going to try to get something going here early. But this became a really defensive game that we ended up seeing. Not really a lot of scoring that we saw in that first half. Neither defense really giving up very much, to be honest with you guys. But, Paul Pierce, he's trying to, finish his potential college career on a high note. It's going to get a nice tackle in the open field, as that is going to be able to bring Tim Turner down for just a game of one, as we're seeing Paul Peters go to work in that ground game, really providing some stout run defense here for the University of Central Florida. As 4th and 1, I actually thought that they got him behind the line of scrimmage. There was no challenge, unfortunately. I feel like Paul Peters was certainly robbed of that, but hey, he's trying to put his guys in a position to where he doesn't have to rely on the refs in order to ensure a national championship. And that's exactly what we saw, man. UCF, they were able to find an offensive rhythm in the second half, and UCF is going to win it all here. They will be able to claim a legitimate national championship, unlike the one that they tried to dispute back in 2017. Good performance here by Paul Peters as well. He ends up with 7 tackles. Richard Davis also got to play as a backup and provided a good spark for the LSU Tigers. So it was an absolute slugfest in the college football playoff, as there wasn't any blowouts until, ironically, that national championship game. For UCF, they only beat USC by 2, Army by 2 before blowing out LSU, whereas LSU beat Miami by 12 and Texas A&M by a single point before getting to that national championship game. So we check out the season stats as we get ready to wrap up year number 4, and we do see TJ Warzone not only end up with the NCAA lead in passing yards, but we'll also see him win a Heisman Trophy. So, I mean, he has to be someone that's got to go to the NFL, and we'll check that later. As for the running game, Kaysen of the Miami Hurricanes led the NCAA, had a narrow advantage over the University of Cal running back Kevin Cross. He ends up leading the NCAA with 1,870 yards. As for receivers, Nelson of Texas A&M ends up with 1,300 yards receiving, which is best in the NCAA. Dane Adams, who is one of your guys' customs, he was also in the top 10 with just under 1,200 yards on the season. For tackling, we see Tyson Young of Texas lead the way in terms of solo tackles. He ends up garnering 56 throughout the season. For sacks, we see a two-way tie for first, as Williams and Johnson each had 11.5 sacks. Few other guys ended up with double-digit sacks as well. At least 3 of them end up in a three-way tie with 10.5 sacks. Finally, for interceptions, a 5-way tie for first place, as it looks like 7 interceptions was that magic number in order to be tied for first. So at this point, even though we haven't gone to the college football playoff the past couple of years, we have really turned into an NFL factory. Look at the number of guys that we are sending to the NFL. It is an absolutely incredible group, full of day 1 and day 2 picks. Dane Adams, him coming back to school, really did work out for him, as he ends up being a first round projected pick. He ends up with 77 catches, 1,180 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So that was a good year for him. Chad Dahl is also trying to declare, but he's a day 3 pick. So I am going to ask him to stay home, and he will accept our offer. So should have a pretty good team that's in contention for the college football playoff for the final year of this sim. But one surprising thing that we will see is that Henry Sanzabar was able to get a waiver from the Department of Defense here, as he is going to be projected to go in the first round of the NFL draft. So what that does mean is that he will get to enjoy his NFL career, and then he will defer his military service for another time, since he did go to the Army Academy. One player that will not be going to the NFL, though, is Saquon Olander. Olander, he ends up, he's going to graduate from the University of Cal. He was a Jet winner a couple of years ago, but couldn't really do much on the field. He does get 4 interceptions, but that will not be enough to achieve his NFL dream. And the breaking of dreams continues even at Clemson. Caleb Fisher is not going to go to the NFL. He did get to start his senior year after Casey Carmichael did end up graduating and did go to the NFL himself, but that same thing will not happen for him, even though he did have a solid senior year, 23 touchdowns versus just 4 interceptions thrown. Also not going to the NFL either is Shaston Golden, the true senior from San Antonio, Texas. He was a 4-year on the field person, but with that being said, could not impress those NFL scouts enough. He did have decent production though for being primarily a backup tailback his entire college career. That being said, we will see another one of your custom guys go though. Asante Randolph Jr. of Florida Atlantic, the Plantation, Florida product. He is going to be a 6th round NFL draft pick, and not somebody that is good at getting to the quarterback. He only had 3.5 sacks throughout his college career, but 7 career interceptions. He does have what it takes to be quite the ball hawk in spite of his weaknesses that he has in tackling. Another one of your custom guys going to the NFL that I was kind of surprised about is Jackson DeVille. Jackson DeVille was able to be a 3rd round NFL draft pick. He's got pretty good mobility and an extremely accurate arm, but in spite of all of those accuracy stuff, he never had more than 60% as a completion percentage, but he certainly has the tools to be successful at the NFL level. But the utility player Brandon Robbins will not be enjoying that, however, as Brandon Robbins, he will graduate with his degree, but not an opportunity to go to the NFL, as he had 9.5 sacks as a interior defensive lineman, 32 TFLs. He does have 1 forced fumble to his name, but just was one of those guys that was a solid college player, but didn't really have much of a shot of going to the NFL, especially playing at a basketball school. But there is another interior defensive lineman, though, that will be going to the NFL. It's Richard Davis, the senior redshirt who got to play in that national championship game. He is going to be projected as a 4th round selection. Now, he was primarily a backup as well in that 3-4 scheme, but he's just a really talented football player. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that can easily plug up the middle? This is certainly Richard Davis in a nutshell. Moving over to the University of Louisville, we will see Paul Henry graduate from the Louisville Cardinals. The Kokomo, Indiana product was somebody that was, again, a solid college football player, but just doesn't have the technique in order to be a solidified NFL prospect. Could still make it as an undrafted free agent potentially. He does have the production, but he's going to have a long climb up and might only get 1 shot, much less chances than if he would say be a 1st round pick. Now, someone that was also kind of screwed over from the transfer portal was Caden Thomas. Now, Caden Thomas actually was a starter at one point. He was a starter his sophomore redshirt year. He was named a starter, but then somebody came in the transfer portal that was simply a lot better, and he also had some shoulder injuries. He only had 74 throw power as well. He did get to see some action in his senior redshirt season, but he never got to see his stock recover, and he's not going to be an NFL guy, unfortunately. Now, you want to talk about somebody that had all the tools to be successful, but just didn't happen for them, though. It's PJ Nitro. He was someone that hasn't, he got up to a 92 overall, but his stats were never that fantastic. He did have a great start to his junior season before he got hurt, and then he comes back his senior year. He throws double-digit interceptions, so 8,000 career yards, nothing to be ashamed of. He was a 4-year starter, but NFL not going to be in the cards for him either. Up next, we have them Hook'em Horns over at the University of Texas, where we check in to see how Sean Gold did, and Sean Gold just never got consistent playing time. He never had more than 70 carries in a single season. He did find the end zone 11 times, so he was a solid backup, but he was a guy that was always buried on the depth chart, and for him, that does mean that he did have to end up not seeing that NFL potential be realized. But this next custom not going to the NFL was absolutely surprising. TJ Warzone, who led the NCAA in passing yards 2 years in a row, even was named a Heisman Trophy winner, he's going to just straight up graduate. I really don't get it. I don't know why he's not going to the NFL. Maybe it's just a personal choice for him, but wow, this is incredibly disappointing, and you absolutely hate to see it. However, someone that I was not as surprised to see not go to the NFL is Speedy Hendricks. He had a solid career over at Troy, saw the field all 4 years that he was on campus, but never was able to crack 1,000 yards. And he was also never consistently the starter on this team either, in spite of the obvious talent that this kid certainly has. I mean, look at his skill set. He's got some great skills, but, Troy's just not an NFL factory. Maybe if he went to a bigger school, he might have been able to go to the NFL. Also not going to the NFL, in spite of having the stats to back it up, is Jacob Cool Beans Jr. The Cherry Hill, New Jersey product did end up going with the Blazers of UAB. And while he's not a very quick athlete out there at that linebacker position, he's very fundamentally sound, and he's got really good stats. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that has 5 forced fumbles over the course of his career, 3 of them in his senior year. He's got a fumble recovery as well, a defensive touchdown, a few interceptions. Guy did a little bit of everything, just not fast enough to cut it as an NFL linebacker, unfortunately. And before we do the preview of year number 5, Jeff Jefferson III, another one of your customs, he will go to the NFL, but maybe should have declared after his junior year. We did see a drop off in stats for him. He had less catches, less yards, less touchdowns as well. He did have less drops, so at least there's that for him, but just somebody that might have benefited from leaving after his junior year versus staying for his senior year. Still will go to the NFL, but he's only going to be a 6th-round projected draft pick. So we get into the final year of this sim, this can we remain dominant, and look, Michigan State is still hanging up in there. B+ overall squad, and it looks like there's not really a dominant team in college football. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of B+ here, you guys. A lot of B's in there. Do we see an A-? Okay, so Oklahoma's an A+ across the board. They're probably going to win the national championship. Ole Miss is an A+ as well. So a couple of dominant teams, but in a playoff field of 8 squads, you never know what can truly happen. Let's go ahead and sim to the end of this season. Let's see if we can actually get ourselves into the college football playoff this time around. Go ahead and see how that college football playoff bracket turns out. We're going to take a look into the Carolina Conference, take a little check-in for DeMar Joseph, one of your guys' custom players who, after his senior redshirt season, finally gets the chance to start. And, let's see what he does with the opportunity. Taking on the University of Charlotte. Charlotte's number 20 in the nation. Clemson, meanwhile, number 6. So if they can win this game, they will be going to the college football playoff, and early on at least it seems like Clemson does have their business taken care of. They got 2-score lead that they're working with, but then we end up seeing Clemson's offense stall just a little bit. So we'll see if the defense can pick up the slack, as we'll go ahead and see Harley trying to make the pitch, but DeMar Joseph is going to be there in order to go ahead and make the tackle. So that will be a nice open field tackle there for DeMar Joseph. We'll see another one in the open field as well. This quarterback certainly loves the chance to go ahead and scramble. We'll see if that ends up hurting them at all. But then we go into the second half. Again, we still see that offense struggling a little bit. Clemson to this point only has scored 14 points, like the CPU Clemson offense really having a hard time figuring things out. I don't know what to tell you, but in spite of all that, they still have a lead going into the 4th quarter, where DeMar trying to bait him, and he couldn't get those hands up in time. So he gives up a big play to Will Hall. That's a 30-yard reception. He does make the tackle, and just getting put in some tough spots. Like, how do we not make that play? I thought we were going to read that. I thought we were taking that to the crib, but we just fumbled the bag straight up and down, and this team in general fumbled the bag. We end up losing the game. Charlotte ends up being Clemson 18-17. I mean, it's certainly not the defense's fault, but it is what it is. DeMar Joseph was at least all over the field. So for the final year of this 5-year sim, we actually do make the college football playoff. We make it as the number 3 seed, where we'll take on Nebraska in the first round. We'll also be joined by Alabama, USC, Iowa State, Cal, Troy, and Florida State, who got that last spot in the college football playoff. Now the only thing that remains to be seen is, can our Michigan State Spartans get back to the national championship one more time in this series? Alright boys, so that national championship is actually going to feature 2 teams that hail from the West Coast. We got the USC Trojans taking on the California Bears. They are both here in that national championship opportunity. We're going to see what happens, man. We're going to go ahead and super sim this thing. We'll see, who ends up being who in this one. And, early on in this game, very defensive battle. Only a 3-0 lead for Cal going into the start of the second quarter. And that remains a pattern for good chunk of this game, but then we jump into that second half. We see a little bit more action happening. USC starting to string together a couple of really good drives. They're going to be up 28-21, and they are going to hang on and win this football game, man. You love to see it. USC put up a ton of offense, so 550 yards of total offense. It was a miracle that this actually was not a blowout. But following the National College Football Playoff officially concluded here in year number 5, we'll check in on the last batch of custom guys that you had in this series and see if any of them made it to the NFL, and we got at least one. Paul Peters at the University of Central Florida, who was a 5-year guy, a senior redshirt. He's going to be a 3rd-round draft pick. At Clemson, DeMar Joseph, who we saw in the conference championship, and unfortunately that offense sold him a little bit. He's still going to go on to the NFL and will end up being a 2nd-round pick in the NFL. But one person I'm surprised is not going to the NFL, though, is DJ Smith. In spite of him being a 98 overall, he put up some solid numbers the last 3 years, but it just will not be enough to cut it. Also not good enough to make it to the NFL is Rylo Young, the senior redshirt from Prattville, Alabama. He's going to graduate from Vanderbilt with his bachelor's, but he will not be able to achieve that NFL dream. He was a solid college player, but just, never dominated, and that lack of dominance is going to prevent him from going to the NFL. So that's going to wrap up today's episode, the final episode of the Realignment Dynasty. This took a lot of time to make, so it would really make my day if y'all could smack that like button. Hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new, as even though we are saying goodbye to this series. That being said, though, we got some things in the work, and if you've seen my FCS series, I might have dropped a hint or two in there in terms of what's coming next. Can't wait for the future of this channel, and I hope you guys are as well. With that being said, this is John J. Gaming on the mic, signing off. Hoping you're all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.